So we're actually going to start today. We got a couple of fan questions submitted over this last week. And our first question actually comes from at the Intense Eagle on Twitter. And he asks, is Kyler Murray a viable fantasy option? Who is the go-to running back this season? And which wide receiver will have a breakout year this year? Starting with Kyler Murray, I personally definitely think that he is going to be a great fantasy option, especially since they added DeAndre Hopkins to the roster and they already had a loaded wide receiver room with Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk on the roster already. And they added Kenyon Drake from Miami to the backfield. So Kyler Murray is definitely going to have a great year this year, I think, even if the Cardinals don't produce wins, which I think they're going to be better than they were last year overall, but I do think their offense is going to be very explosive this year.
You might be right with Kyler Murray. He got DeAndre Hopkins, which is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, with first and second year quarterbacks, I withhold judgment for a little bit. Last year, I was expecting Kyler Murray to be a much more impactful runner as a quarterback and get a lot of yards on the ground. He actually
Yeah.
wasn't much of that. So if that's really not a big part of his game, that might impact how good he is as a quarterback going forward.
Mhm. Yeah, that whole running aspect of a quarterback can be huge. We've seen it with Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, and Lamar Jackson in the last couple of years, how big that running can be. So maybe he can kind of step up and use that a little bit more this year. That again will add huge fantasy value because those running yards are more valuable than the passing yards. So then moving on to the go-to running back, it's got to just be Christian McCaffrey. He's by far the best running back in fantasy, as well as probably in the league. To be honest, he can do it all. He's especially in PPR leagues. He can catch passes out of the backfield, and he's obviously a great, straightforward runner who can just power ups through the lines.
I agree. He's almost like a wide receiver as a running back. So he gets you two players in one almost. He has had about 1,000 yards receiving, led the league as far as running backs and receiving the past 2 years. So very
Mhm.
impressive by him.
Yeah, so he's by far the go-to running back. And then quickly, the which wide receiver will have a breakout year this year? Obviously, in my personal opinion, I think it's going to be Kenny Galladay. But after he put up 1,000 yard season and led the league in touchdowns, how much more can you really break out? He just doesn't get the national recognition that he deserves. So if you want my non-biased opinion, I think it could possibly be Deontay Johnson from the Steelers. He could have a great year this year. He saw his snaps increase immensely, and especially with Ben Roethlisberger coming back, hopefully healthy, and Juju Smith-Schuster probably drawing a lot of the attention on defense. I think he could have a lot of catches this year.
Yeah, picking a Steeler wide receiver historically is a pretty good move. For some reason, they're just able to hit on wide receivers, even late round wide receivers like
Mm-hmm.
Antonio Brown, Mike Wallace a few years back, Juju Smith-Schuster, which was a second round pick.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it's their offense, if it's their coaching, or if it's Roethlisberger, or just combination of everything. But their wide receivers generally outperform.
So that's an early season statement. I would like to bring this point back up. If he does perform pretty well, I hope you draft him and I hope he does well for you. Moving on, we actually got a couple more questions from Blaine Kuhnman. I apologize if I butchered your name, but he reached out to us on Facebook and he asked us a few questions, but we just grabbed a couple of them. So the first question he asked is, why haven't the Lions signed Kenny Galladay to an extension yet? And quickly, my personal opinion, honestly, I'm not sure, but they do have a few people to extend this year with obviously him and Taylor Decker requiring an extension coming up. And this whole COVID situation has definitely brought upon some uncertain times that a lot of agents and a lot of teams don't know what the salary cap going to be changing over the next couple of years. It's hard to give people long-term extensions. Again, we'll just have to wait and see on that. What are your thoughts on that, Jimmy?
Yeah, it was a really good idea for Bob Quinn to wait to extend Golladay until the whole COVID CBA was passed and all the opt-outs were decided. We've
Mm-hmm.
seen what happened with a guy like CJ Mosley, who signed a huge contract a couple years ago and now has opted out and has made $29 million for playing 1 year of football. And that 1 year, he actually only played 2 games. So the Jets are getting a horrible return on that contract. And given that there could be a COVID opt outs in 2021, Bob Quinn is doing the smart thing, seeing how this plays out. And now that we know exactly what the CBA is, now going ahead and structuring Galladay's extension just in case of a future COVID issue is a smart move.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the biggest question. Even agents have said that this is unprecedented times and they don't really know how to go about with trying to structure your contracts, whatever, for the future. So it's going to be interesting to see. And like I said, quick off topic, if we had to choose between Kenny Galladay or Taylor Decker, I think we've talked about this before, but if we had to pick one of them, who would you choose to extend?
Well, my preference as a fan would be Golladay just because he's exciting. He's a third round pick who vastly outperformed where he was drafted. It's fun to watch. We're used to watching exciting quarterbacks with Calvin Johnson. So that's the more exciting guy, but an offensive tackle is extremely important as well.
Mhm. Yeah, like I said, I think we've talked about this before, and plus with Taylor Decker being a first round pick, you obviously used a little bit more higher value on him to begin with than Kenny Galladay. And I'm not saying Bob Quinn's known for picking gems in the late round draft, but he has gotten a few picks that can perform in the later rounds. So it's possible that he could again pick up a wide receiver, find another wide receiver in the late rounds who I'm not saying could be like Kenny Galladay, but can still put up decent numbers. So
Galladay's probably going to cost more than Decker if we're talking about a money standpoint. The franchise tag for this year for offensive tackles was 15 million. For wide receivers, 18 million.
yeah.
So if Bob Quinn's trying to make a choice here, which guy to keep, the offensive tackle is probably going to be cheaper.
Yep. So I agree. If we had to choose, I definitely think we should choose Taylor Decker over Kenny Galladay, but which you said is not going to be the fan favorite choice there. But moving on to Blaine's next question, he asked, "Is Jarrad Davis done in Detroit? And if so, will he succeed more with his next team, i.e., similar to Kyle Van Noy with the New England Patriots?" My first opinion is I do think this could be his last year in Detroit, but that obviously largely depends on his play this year because Matt Patricia has stated that he wants to keep him in Detroit. And we obviously brought in Corey Underlin, who is going to be changing, hopefully, the style of this defense and can be using him in a completely different style. And he claims to have added, I believe, about 6 pounds of muscle, he says. So we could be looking at a different Jarrad Davis this year. So again, I do think this could be his last year, but if he can step up and play well in this new style of or defense, then he might have a new role for the next coming years.
Yeah, here are a few reasons why it's likely to be his last year. We did not pick up his fifth year option, so it's not like we're super confident in what we're getting with him. He's going to be a free agent at the end of this year. He's unlikely to play well enough to deserve a franchise tag or any kind of tag.
Hmm.
So that means as a free agent, any team can get him, any team can outbid us for him. So it's unlikely we're also going to extend him in the middle of the year because we're probably not going to see enough just a few games into the season to want to give him an extension.
Yeah.
So putting this all together, he's probably going to hit free agency in the offseason, which means it's unlikely he'll be back.
Yeah, I agree. But again, it depends on his play this year and if he's willing to come back. But I think if he can hit free agency, I think some teams might be willing to give him a big contract and try to figure out a different way to utilize him.
Yeah, it's sort of sad because I want him back. I like him. I always like our drafted guys, and he hasn't been a bust. He's still
Right.
very athletic, and he can have a role. So I would like to see him back.
Yeah, I completely agree. You always, like you said, you always have to root for the players that we draft, especially that high in the first, second round, third round. You always root for them to succeed. You always want to see them continue success in Detroit as opposed to seeing them succeed in other teams. So,
Yeah, and he's such a good character guy too. Such a real high quality guy. No off the field issues. It's a guy that's easy to root for.
yeah, I completely agree with you.